Now let me talk to you the way it needs to be said. See, one thing I've learned about men, and I am one, is this: familiarity can make a man comfortable, and comfort can make him careless. When you answer every call on the first ring, when you text back in 30 seconds, when you always forgive before he even apologizes, you teach him something. You teach him that you're not going anywhere. And once a man feels like you're not going anywhere, some of them, not all, but some, start taking you for granted. Stop over giving your time, your energy, and your access. That's where it begins. A lot of women don't even realize they're over giving because it feels natural. When you care, you show up. When you love, you invest. When you're committed, you give your best. But there is a difference between giving from strength and giving from fear. If you are giving because you're afraid to lose him, afraid he'll pull away, afraid someone else will take your place, that's not love, that's insecurity disguised as devotion. When a man takes you for granted, it's usually because you made yourself too available, not because you're not valuable, but because you made your value too easy to access. You answer every call, no matter what you're doing. You cancel plans to accommodate him. You prioritize his needs over your own consistently. You respond immediately. You adjust your schedule. You forgive quickly. You keep giving chances. After a while, he stops seeing your effort as effort. It becomes expected. And once something becomes expected, appreciation fades. See, a man respects what he has to work for. If he never has to work to see you, never has to think about when he'll hear from you, never has to earn your time, then he starts believing your presence is automatic. Automatic things lose excitement. They lose urgency. They lose perceived value. Over giving drains you slowly. You start feeling exhausted, but you don't know why. You feel unappreciated, but you can't pinpoint the moment it shifted. That's because it wasn't one moment. It was a pattern. Every time you said yes when you wanted to say no. Every time you texted first when you promised yourself you wouldn't. Every time you explained your feelings instead of observing his actions. Let me tell you something powerful. Access to you should be a privilege, not a guarantee. Your time is limited. Your energy is sacred. When you hand it out freely without boundaries, you teach people how to treat it. If you treat your time like it's disposable, he will too. Stopping over giving doesn't mean becoming cold or cruel. It means becoming balanced. It means matching effort. If he calls once a day, you don't need to call 3 times. If he takes hours to respond, you don't need to reply in seconds. If he's inconsistent, you stop being consistent for someone who hasn't earned it. When you pull back your overgiving, something shifts. First, you feel uncomfortable. You'll feel the urge to reach out. You'll feel like you're losing control. But that discomfort is growth. That's you breaking a habit of overextending yourself for validation. Then he starts noticing. The energy feels different. The access feels limited. The convenience disappears. And that's when he has to decide, does he step up or does he let it fade? Here's the truth. If your absence makes no difference to him, your presence was never valued properly in the first place. But if your slight withdrawal creates effort, curiosity, and pursuit, now you're dealing with a man who understands loss. Over giving often comes from wanting reassurance. You think if you give more, he'll love more. But love doesn't grow because of excess giving. It grows because of mutual investment. You cannot pour into someone endlessly while they barely tip the cup back your way. That's not partnership. That's imbalance. When you stop over giving, you regain your power, you regain your time, you regain your emotional stability. And most importantly, you send a silent message, I am valuable, and access to me must be earned. That shift alone can change the entire dynamic. Silence creates value where words failed. That's something many people don't understand until they've exhausted themselves trying to explain, defend, and prove their worth. When a man takes you for granted, your first instinct is usually to talk more. You try to explain how you feel. You try to point out what he's doing wrong. You try to remind him of everything you've done. You think if he just understands clearly enough, he'll change. But sometimes the more you talk, the less impact your words have. When someone grows accustomed to hearing your complaints without consequences, your voice becomes background noise, not because your feelings don't matter, but because there's no shift in behavior attached to them. He hears you, but he doesn't feel the need to respond differently. That's when silence becomes powerful. Silence is not weakness. Silence is a statement. When you stop repeating yourself, when you stop chasing conversations that go nowhere, when you stop arguing for basic respect, you create a pause. And in that pause, he has space to think. Words can be debated. Silence cannot. See, when you constantly explain why you deserve better treatment, you're unknowingly asking for permission to be valued. But when you go quiet, when you withdraw your emotional commentary, you send a message that doesn't require approval. You're saying without speaking that you refuse to participate in dynamics that drain you. Silence changes the energy. Instead of reacting, you observe. Instead of pleading, you detach. Instead of convincing, you allow reality to speak for itself. That shift unsettles people who were comfortable with your constant engagement. A man who is used to your long texts, your emotional transparency, your immediate responses will feel the difference when those things stop. And here's what makes silence powerful. It introduces uncertainty. When you're always expressing how much you care, he feels secure, maybe too secure. But when you fall quiet, he starts wondering, is she okay? Is she upset? Is she pulling away? Is she losing interest? That wondering forces him to confront the possibility of losing you. Now understand something important. Silence is not about manipulation. It's not about trying to scare him into action. It's about reclaiming your dignity. When talking hasn't produced change, silence becomes protection. You protect your peace. You protect your emotional energy. You protect your self-respect. There is strength in not responding immediately. There is strength in not addressing every minor slight. There is strength in allowing someone to notice the absence of your usual warmth. When your kindness is constant, it can be overlooked. When it's withdrawn, it's felt. People value what they notice. And sometimes they only notice what's missing. Silence also gives you clarity. When you stop filling the space with explanations and emotion, you get to watch his actions. Does he reach out? Does he check in? Does he attempt to fix what's broken? Or does he enjoy the quiet because he never invested deeply to begin with? His reaction to your silence reveals more than any argument ever could. When words fail to create awareness, silence can create reflection. It forces accountability without confrontation. It allows consequences to exist naturally. If he misses you, he'll step up. If he doesn't, you've learned something valuable without sacrificing more of yourself. Silence restores your power because it shifts the focus back to you. Instead of trying to convince someone of your worth, you simply embody it. And nothing speaks louder than a woman who knows she doesn't have to argue to be respected. A man respects what he has to earn back. That's a truth a lot of people don't talk about openly, but it shows up in behavior every single day. When something is handed to someone without effort, without challenge, without the risk of losing it, appreciation slowly fades. It's not always intentional. Sometimes it's human nature. But when a man doesn't have to work to keep you, he may slowly stop working altogether. When you've been consistent, loyal, supportive, and forgiving, and he still took you for granted, it's usually because there were no real consequences attached to his complacency. He knew that no matter how distracted he became, no matter how little effort he put in, you would still be there. That security turned into comfort, and that comfort turned into laziness. Earning something back changes the psychology completely. When a man feels like he might lose access to you, when he senses that the connection is no longer guaranteed, something inside him shifts. Suddenly, what felt permanent now feels temporary. What felt secure now feels uncertain. And uncertainty creates urgency. If you've always been available, always forgiving, always initiating contact after disagreements, he never had to step into the role of pursuit again. He never had to prove himself because you kept proving yourself instead. But once you pull back and stop making it easy, he has to decide whether he's willing to put in effort. Effort is what builds respect. When he has to call more than once, when he has to plan, when he has to apologize sincerely, when he has to show consistency instead of assuming yours. That effort reminds him of your value. It reminds him that being in your life is not automatic. And here's the powerful part. When someone earns something back, they protect it differently. Think about anything you've worked hard for. You treat it with care because you know what it cost you. The same principle applies in relationships. If he has to fight for your attention again, if he has to rebuild trust, if he has to demonstrate change, he will think twice before jeopardizing it again. But this only works if you're serious. You cannot pretend to pull back while secretly hoping he won't notice. You cannot say you're done and then respond the moment he reaches out with minimal effort. If he's going to earn you back, the standard has to be real. When a man senses that you're willing to walk away rather than accept less, he understands that your presence is a privilege. That awareness alone can reset the entire dynamic. It moves him from complacency to action. Now understand something clearly. If he chooses not to earn you back, that tells you everything you need to know. Respect cannot be forced. Effort cannot be begged for. If he watches you step away and does nothing, then he valued convenience more than connection. But if he steps up, if he calls consistently, plans intentionally, communicates clearly, and backs his words with actions, then he is demonstrating something different. He is proving that losing you is not an option he's willing to accept. Respect grows in spaces where effort exists, and when you stop being easily accessible and start requiring intentional action, you give him the opportunity to show whether he truly values you. If he wants you, he will earn you. If he doesn't, you've saved yourself from continuing to invest in someone who never intended to invest back. Distance reveals his true intentions. When you are always close, always available, always engaged, it becomes very easy for a man to play a role. He can say the right things, send the right messages, give you just enough attention to keep you there. But when you create distance, when you step back and remove the constant access he had to you, the truth begins to surface. Proximity can hide a lot. When you are right there, filling the gaps, initiating conversations, planning meetups, fixing misunderstandings, you are unknowingly carrying the weight of the connection. He doesn't have to show his full intentions because you are compensating for what's missing. The moment you stop doing that, the dynamic shifts. Distance is uncomfortable for someone who was benefiting from your constant presence without investing equally. When you stop reaching out first, when you stop checking in, when you stop asking how his day was, you create silence. And in that silence, his intentions are exposed. Does he lean in or does he lean out? Does he notice the change and step up? Or does he enjoy the space because he was never fully committed in the first place? A man who genuinely values you will feel your absence immediately. He won't sit back casually. He will reach out. He will ask questions. He will want to understand what changed. He will put effort into restoring the connection because he sees you as important. But a man who was simply comfortable, who enjoyed the convenience of you being there without deeper intention, will often do nothing. And that nothing speaks volumes. Distance removes illusion. It strips away the daily routine that can make a connection feel deeper than it actually is. Sometimes you think you're building something solid, but what you're really building is a habit. When you remove yourself from the habit, you see whether there is real substance underneath. There's also something powerful about how distance changes your perspective. When you step back, you're not just observing his behavior, you're observing your own feelings more clearly. You start to notice how much you were tolerating. You realize how often you were anxious, overthinking, waiting. Distance gives you emotional clarity that closeness sometimes clouds. Intentions show up through consistency. If he intends to build something meaningful, he will bridge the gap. He won't let pride stop him. He won't disappear for days without explanation. He won't allow distance to grow without trying to close it. But if his intentions were temporary, casual, or uncertain, Distance gives him the excuse to drift without effort. That's why stepping back is so powerful. It's not about testing him in a childish way. It's about removing yourself from over-functioning in the relationship and allowing him to function on his own. When you stop carrying the emotional responsibility, you see whether he was ever willing to carry it with you. Distance also protects you. Instead of continuously investing in someone who is undecided, you give yourself space to evaluate. You're no longer blinded by daily communication or small gestures. You're looking at actions from a wider lens. When you create distance, you're not pushing him away. You're allowing reality to speak. If he moves toward you with clarity and commitment, you have your answer. If he fades without resistance, you also have your answer. And that answer is more honest than any words he could have given you while you were standing right next to him. Self-worth must be louder than your emotions. That is one of the hardest lessons to learn when you care deeply about someone, because emotions are powerful. They make you want to call when you said you wouldn't. They make you want to text, "I miss you," even after you promised yourself you'd stay silent. They make you excuse behavior that you know you shouldn't tolerate. Feelings can be overwhelming, especially when you've invested your time, your energy, and your heart. But here's the truth: emotions are temporary waves. Self-worth is the foundation. And when the waves are louder than the foundation, you start making decisions that slowly chip away at your dignity. When a man takes you for granted, your emotions will tell you to fight for the connection. They will tell you to prove your value, to remind him what you bring to the table, to hold on tighter so he doesn't slip away. Fear of losing him can become stronger than respect for yourself. That's when the imbalance begins. Self-worth speaks differently. It doesn't panic. It doesn't chase. It doesn't beg. Self-worth says, if I am not appreciated, I will adjust my presence. Self-worth says, I deserve consistency. Self-worth says, I will not shrink myself just to be chosen. The challenge is that emotions feel urgent. They demand immediate action. When he pulls away, your heart races. When he ignores you, your mind overthinks. When he treats you casually, your feelings get hurt. And in those moments, you want relief. Reaching out gives temporary relief. Getting a reply gives temporary comfort. But if the behavior doesn't change, you are soothing your anxiety while tolerating disrespect. Self-worth requires discipline. It requires you to sit with discomfort instead of reacting to it. It requires you to resist the urge to fix something that you didn't break. That's strength. Anyone can react emotionally. Not everyone can respond with composure. When your self-worth is louder than your emotions, you start evaluating actions instead of clinging to potential. You stop falling in love with who he could be and start observing who he consistently shows himself to be. You stop making excuses like he's just stressed or he doesn't mean it when the pattern continues. It doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love yourself equally. A lot of women stay in situations where they feel undervalued because their emotions are attached to memories, promises, and hope But self-worth looks at patterns. It asks, is this man adding peace to my life or anxiety? It asks, am I respected when I'm not around? It asks, if nothing changed, would I be happy staying like this for years? Emotions focus on moments. Self-worth focuses on standards. When you allow emotions to lead, you might accept breadcrumbs because you're hungry for affection. But when self-worth leads, you recognize that crumbs are not a meal. You understand that attention once in a while is not commitment. You realize that apologies without change are manipulation. Being guided by self-worth means you're willing to walk away from what hurts you, even if you still care. It means you understand that missing someone is not a reason to lower your standards. It means you can say, I feel this deeply, but I will not tolerate less than I deserve. And here's the powerful shift. When a man sees that your standards do not bend based on your feelings, he either rises to meet them or he removes himself. Either outcome protects you. Self-worth also changes your energy. You become calmer. You stop over-explaining. You stop seeking validation from someone who hasn't earned access to your vulnerability. You start pouring that energy into yourself, your growth, your goals, your peace. And that glow, that quiet confidence is far more attractive than desperation. Feelings will always exist. You're human. But they cannot be the driver of your decisions. They can sit in the passenger seat, acknowledged and respected, but self-worth must hold the steering wheel, because when your self-worth is louder than your emotions, you don't lose yourself trying to keep someone else. You remain grounded, you remain dignified, and you remind the world without shouting that your heart is valuable and it will not be handled carelessly. Ignoring is not revenge, it is self-protection. And that distinction matters more than you think. When a man takes you for granted and you decide to step back, some people will assume you're trying to punish him. They'll say you're playing games. They'll say you're trying to teach him a lesson. But the real reason for pulling away has nothing to do with hurting him. It has everything to do with protecting yourself. Revenge is emotional. Revenge wants someone to feel the same pain you felt. Revenge is fueled by anger, pride, and ego. But self-protection is calm, it's intentional, it's mature. It says, I see what this dynamic is doing to me, and I refuse to let it continue. When you ignore a man who has been careless with your heart, you are not trying to break his. You are stopping him from continuing to break yours. There comes a point in every unhealthy dynamic where you have to ask yourself, is staying engaged costing me my peace? If the answer is yes, then distance becomes necessary, not dramatic, not loud, just necessary. You stop responding instantly. You stop initiating every conversation. You stop volunteering emotional energy that is not being reciprocated. That's not cruelty, that's boundaries. Self-protection is about recognizing patterns. If he only reaches out when he's bored, if he only shows affection after you pull away, if he gives you just enough to keep you attached, but never enough to feel secure, those patterns are signals. Ignoring him interrupts the pattern. It breaks the cycle where he benefits from your availability without investing equally. And here's something important. Protecting yourself does not require his agreement. You don't need him to understand why you're stepping back. You don't need him to validate your feelings. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is quietly adjust your behavior without announcing it. When you stop engaging in a situation that drains you, you begin to heal. You give your nervous system a break from constant uncertainty. You give your mind a break from overthinking. You give your heart space to reset. That's not revenge. That's recovery. A lot of women confuse endurance with strength. They think staying and tolerating proves loyalty. But real strength is knowing when to remove yourself from something that repeatedly disrespects you. You can care about someone and still decide that their behavior is unacceptable. Ignoring also forces accountability without confrontation. Instead of arguing about what he did wrong, you show him through absence that his actions have consequences. Not consequences you created out of anger, but natural consequences of his choices. If he neglected you, he now feels your absence. If he dismissed your feelings, he now experiences emotional distance. Self-protection shifts the focus back to you. Instead of obsessing over what he's doing, you start focusing on what you need. You invest in your routine, your friendships, your goals. You rediscover the parts of yourself that may have been overshadowed by trying to maintain the connection. That shift is empowering. And let's be honest, sometimes ignoring reveals something deeper. If he doesn't notice your withdrawal, if he doesn't attempt to reconnect, if he seems unaffected, that information is valuable. It might hurt, but it's honest. It shows you that your energy was more invested than his. And knowing that truth protects you from continuing to pour into a one-sided situation. Self-protection is not about building walls forever. It's about creating space to evaluate whether someone deserves continued access to you. If he responds with maturity, consistency, and real effort, then there's room for rebuilding. But if he responds with ego, indifference, or manipulation, you've already taken the first step toward freedom. Ignoring is not about winning a power struggle. It's about refusing to participate in one. It's about choosing peace over chaos. It's about loving yourself enough to step away from what diminishes you. And when you approach it from that place, calm, grounded, intentional, your silence carries strength, not bitterness, not resentment, just clarity.